Welcome to our Balcones tasting video, Joshua and Nation. What do you think of the color of that?
Oh man, it is dark. It's dark, but it's kind of cherry dark. I think if the official internal color is red brass. That's what we called it,
Oh,
red brass. Yeah,
oh,
let me grab my glass.
I don't know if we've had red brass around here before. Right a bit, over a bit, up a bit, round the world a bit.
There it
So,
is.
so I was just in Waco, Texas,
Mm.
and every day was 93 degrees Fahrenheit with 60+% humidity. The day I actually got there, it was 90% humidity.
Oh my gosh.
And
Oh my gosh.
so, and so in talking to our very good friends at Balcones, I'd said, we've lived in a Balcones world
Mm-hmm.
where you've been known for your extreme Texas heat, your extreme Texas environment, and how that has affected your casks. Is the more recent Balcones story more subtle than that?
Huh.
And
Interesting.
they went on to say yes, and then they explained it, and
Mm.
we'll have a One Nation Under Whiskey where they get a chance to talk much more about
All right.
that.
Yep.
But in right here, this is why I asked the question, because I think this Balcones whiskey here is the beginning of a more subtle take on what's happening at that distillery.
Meanwhile, it is absolutely full on, right?
But
Which
here's the
is,
thing, though.
yeah, go ahead.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
It's full on flavor. It's not full on oak. If you can turn the flavometer,
Correct.
right?
Yep. Yep.
The
Hold on.
oak that is on that flavometer is very much in line with what you're getting in some heavily oaked scotches,
Yeah,
some
sure.
regular bourbons, right?
Mhm.
It's not the Balcones off the chain, new charred oak oakiness. Would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that. Yeah, actually, no, I'll agree with that, and I'll support it. Again, looking at the flavometer here, you've got an oakiness, which when compared to the sweetness and the richness on our flavometer, which are an 8 and a 9, two of the largest numbers we've ever put on a flavometer for those two ratings. It's full on from a grain forward standpoint, that grain driven sweetness, that grain driven richness that is supported by the oak.
100%, right?
Yeah.
For me, brown sugar, toffee apples, roasted chicory. On the nose, on the nose.
Yeah, for sure, but there's also, again, behind it,
Mm.
that the oak is playing a wonderful supporting role here, right? It's just like it's this toasty oak with that rich oak spice coming through. Um, I remember when you and I first started tasting through samples, and we'd gotten a rake of samples
Yeah.
from our US warehouse, and it was MGP, and it was Wilderness Trail, and it was New York Distilling, a whole bunch of distilleries,
Yep.
and just lovely bourbons, lovely ryes. And then we got to the Balcones malt,
Yeah.
and we said, oh my gosh, this shows you what barley can do in hot weather. This shows you, you know, bourbon, many bourbon drinkers love bourbon because it's big, brash, and in your face. And this gets to show you that barley can really, really hold its own.
Oh, yeah. I would add apple butter to the nose as I
Oh,
sit with it.
100.
There's a fruit there, but there's a weight to that
Yep.
fruit.
Yep.
And then one that I know I floated to you during the selection process, and you'll get it or you won't, and I'm okay with that. But unlicked antique postage stamps.
See, my problem is anytime I see an antique postage stamp, I just want to go after it.
Which is why I think that's the part that makes this an esoteric tasting note. I think licked antique postage stamps, yeah, everyone's got that in their arsenal. But it's the unlicked nature of them that I think
Mm.
sets it apart. I really do get it in there. What am I talking about, right? Talking about dry paper. I'm talking about that little bit of that kind of gluiness to it, like
Yep.
that little bit of stickiness to it. But
Right, but
it's a lovely, lovely note.
I totally see where you're going with that. I know sometimes when we get some whiskeys that have a bit more of the pronounced oak, we think used bookstores, we think
Mm-hmm.
dry
Mm-hmm.
attics, things like that. And so that seems that, unlicked antique postage stamp note seems to fit within that world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and it's the gum, right? I started saying
Yeah.
stickiness a second ago.
Yeah.
It's the gum. It's the untriggered gum
Yeah.
on the back.
S-
The palate.
So,
Yeah.
so speaking of
Woo.
palate, I was taking a sip while you were talking
Yeah.
earlier, and it is so luxurious.
Ooh.
Meanwhile, it's what, 64 point something percent alcohol?
64.15. 128.3 proof.
And it doesn't drink like that. Like, there's so much oil, there's so much viscosity on this. Some people, not me, some people would call this smooth. That's right. Oh, I should have waited one more second. You would have had a spit take.
I'm going to focus on the rum cake that I'm getting on the palate while the nation sits with the knowledge that you may or may not have buttressed yourself to the word smooth.
Oh man, I'm about to buttress myself to this note. You know that brown bread you can get in a can sometime? It's like sweet brown bread with raisins.
Malted
Yeah,
loaf in a can.
malted loaf in the UK, a German canned brown bread right there across the palate. Just very raisin forward.
Hmm. Yeah, warm
A little bit of
cinnamon for
pumpernickel.
me. Like there's a
Yeah.
bit of warm spice happening there. Baked apples with nutmeg.
Mm,
Drying again, right?
mhm.
The cheeks, the edges of the gums. Oh,
But so I
that's a big whiskey.
I wanna make sure I'm thinking about this right. As you were talking drying, I agree with you, right? And that's one of the things that I love about a good whiskey, when you can have a drying quality to the finish without it being astringent at all. There's no astringency,
Yeah, yeah.
but as I was experiencing that dryness on the finish, I got this subtle hint of spearmint coming
Hmm,
through,
hmm.
which I know you sometimes have a tough time with the
Yeah,
minty quality, but that was coming
yeah.
through for me on across the
I will say
palate.
mint is in season in the garden, and so I'm using a lot of mint from the garden in salads right now. And so I think
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
I'm a little more primed for that note than I normally am.
Oh, wow.
Oh, you're saying that's in the transition of the
It's in the
finish, you're saying?
transition
Transitional
as it yeah, toward the finish.
mm,
Mm. Speaking
mm,
of the
mhm.
finish, it doesn't, right?
Long, longer, longest.
Longest. It just carries and carries, and then you get some, like, roasted coffee beans,
Yeah.
some, like, bitter chocolate. There's that dryness, right? That bitter dark chocolate.
Mm. Burnt molasses.
Oh, oh, man. You know, there's a note in here that our friend, Johnny from Whiskey and Donuts would quite like. It's almost like a Boston cream donut,
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, there's a
right?
sweetness. There's a sweetness, there's a roundness. It's vanilla cream, it's chocolate, it's even the donut itself, right? The dough of the donut.
Mm,
Sweet dough, which is interesting, right? When we talk about funnel cake can be quite doughy and fried goodness from a
mhm.
state fair. I think that donut fits in quite nicely.
Oh, man, see,
Oh,
this
that's
is
good.
what I love
Single malt.
about Right. So let me ask you this really quickly before we get out of here. This is, yes, it's a Balcones. Yes, it's Balcones American Single Malt, but it's a focus on a singular grain variety, and that is their Golden Promise,
Mhm.
which is this sort of heritage malt that was made popular back in the insert decade here with Macallan,
80s?
right? The 80s, right? And Macallan famously used Golden Promise, and that's why that decade is so, you know,
I
popular. Go
s-
on.
I said this in my tastings in Texas, in Austin, and Georgetown, and at the distillery in Waco. Like, I'm old enough that a standard use grain is now a heritage grain. I did not see that happening in my whiskey life. I really did not. But you just said it again, right? Golden Promise heritage grain. Like, I shake my head at turning 50 in June of this year. So,
Oh,
hey, the
man.
month we released these six whiskeys,
Hey, can't wait for the big party.
$85 a bottle for an American single malt that we are insanely proud of.
Yep.
Another spirit of collaboration release with the good people at Balcones, and a Golden Promise focused 4-year-old distilled May of 2019, bottled April of this year. And as Joshua says, 64.15% alcohol
Yeah.
with 161 bottles available. I would not snooze on this. Balcones has got such a wonderful following, and doing some preview tastings in Texas, the Texans are ready to represent on this one. So don't dilly dally, make the magic happen. And cheers to Balcones, Joshua.
Cheers to Balcones. Cheers to a spirit of collaboration, to our viewers, to you, and to nation members all around. Look at that. Oh, you're okay. I got it. I get the hint. Catch up, Hatton.
Cheers, nation.